Lori. You mentioned about how your companies has been integrating your business into the digital domain. And you mentioned about Alibaba and Amazon. We know that Alibaba account for about 57% of the Chinese online retail market. And in 2013, the market reached about $307 billion US. So my question for you is how you as a high-end furniture and interior design company are trying to capture that market opportunity and how you're trying to get a slice of that big cake. Thank you.
Yes, this is a very, very important issue and a good question because the marketplaces are changing the world. If you think of it today, in every category, there's a company called eBags. They have 50,000 bags on their website and they own no inventory. Everything is shipped by somebody else. And similarly, as you know, the Amazon model, they now prefer to having the products shipped by somebody else so that they find that is more profitable than having the products come into the, they have 20 million square feet of distribution space, but they find it's better for them to have somebody else ship it so that at their operating income, that's where they see the benefit. So I believe that this whole question of marketplaces is something that we are looking at very carefully. Now, what it does is, it also is disruptive to your brand, it's disruptive to your service. So the marketplaces reaches a lot of people, but it also commoditizes your brand. So for us, we are looking at carefully of how do we create our own marketplace. Not easy, but that's what our objective is, that while we want to have some associations with these big marketplaces, but a company like ours, the best way for us is to maintain the integrity of our service. Because in our business model, we have to be very careful about returns of poor service. So people who are doing a lot of business in marketplaces of products like ours, they're now finding out that the total return is still a question. That's the reason I said earlier, the return on investment is still being thought through. So we are looking at it very carefully. We are taking a look at to see, do we have the ability to have our own marketplace? And we don't know. Right now, we have not gone into these marketplaces. We are aggressively promoting and projecting our brand through our own website, our digital marketing, domestically and internationally, but we are studying it very, very carefully.
Okay. Yes, please.
My question is to do with e-commerce, and I'm not sure if it's either probably Delta or Ethan Allen. Can you tell me a little bit about mirroring your website and these different markets overseas, how that's affecting your search engine optimization, and is that a necessity?
Yeah, today for Delta.com, we use a proxy solution. So we basically give our website, our translation service provider access to our website. They translate it. When a customer calls up that translated site, it just proxies that one. So in effect, for international SEO, that really hurts us because it's basically the exact same content that's on our Delta.com today. It's just in a different language, so we can't really optimize anything internationally today. What we're doing in the future, though, is we are looking at using a top-level domain. So, for example, in China, we'll switch from Delta.com to Delta.cn, which will make that look like a completely separate website and different content, which will help us increase our SEO presence.
You know, for us, our first challenge was Montreal, right in Canada. Because a few years back, when we had our website for Canada, we had to have Montreal have it in French. So we had to create a website in French, and then when we went to Europe, we took our website and then, of course, had to have it translated in a number of languages, not 2 or 3 right now. And as we go forward, our objective is to continue to take our basic, we don't change our website, of course we change the language. And right now, on a planned basis, our objective is to expand it into China. We have 75 locations in China. And keep in mind that 70% of the product we sell in China are made in our plants in the United States, and we ship them to China. So that is an advantage we have. Because a lot of folks really doing the work on this website don't know where the product is coming from, who makes them. You assume that the website is also producing it. You think your mobile is somehow producing products.
Not yet.
That's what we, not yet, but people think that's what it is. Well, that's not the case. Somebody is making it.
Yes, a question for Mr. Albert Chen. I've been working with one of the Asian American groups, particularly the Vietnamese American group, and in reference to your comment about Asian American regarding the community. So what we've been trying to do is to define economic success and how do we pursue that endeavor to improve our economic success. One metric, obviously, is the household income. I'm curious as to what is your insight that make up economic success of a minority group, such as Asian American, and also what kind of resources and services that we could tap into the federal government to help us in that endeavor.
Thank you. Yeah, good question. I also want to make sure you get to meet George Mui up here. Raise your hand, George. George is our, he's with the White House Initiative of Asian Pacific American Islanders. And he's also with our agency as well. So the Vietnamese community, obviously we know, has faced a lot of challenges, especially here along the Gulf Coast. And as an example, that would be relevant to the communities here geographically, the Restore Act, which I'm sure you've heard about from the Deep Horizon oil spill. There's a fair amount of money that came out of the criminal side and which now they're in the civil side right now in terms of amount of money. So we're looking at how to leverage, we're talking billions of dollars worth of funding. So this is controlled from within a council of various state agencies, but it is managed by the Department of Commerce. So we're looking at how to partnership with within that Restore Act coordinator in terms of how do we get access to be able to funding to help the Vietnamese communities, specifically down here in the Gulf Coast region, in order to rebuild the communities that had went through the devastation of the oil spill. So there's a lot of different mechanisms that we're looking at in order to do that. So I'm more than happy to go with it in detail and clearly invite you to come to DC as well and meet with those people. So that's one example that we're looking at for grants for specific Vietnamese American community because of the fishing industry devastation. Now from the other part, the business development side, we're working with many different communities, the Filipino, Chinese, American, Japanese, and Korean, Vietnamese in terms of how do we get you the visibility in order to show that you are part of the American economy and enabling, and this is something we're working on, is these certified trade missions to specific regions of the country, knowing the Vietnamese American business community has key relationships over there to Vietnam. They want to capture and bring you on those trade missions over there, bring you part of that from the international export and import perspective. So find me afterwards. We'll definitely talk more in depth and get you more information. Okay, thank you.
My question is for Dr. Jing Wang of Huawei. As a young adult who's very technologically oriented and also excited by new options in the market, I'm curious to know what Huawei has done to make the Huawei brand more easily recognized by Americans specifically. For example, as easily recognizable as an Apple product is in America, which may lead to a younger generation's long-term customer base.
Okay. As a matter of fact, a lot of people saying in the media area, a lot of people recognize that there is a stigma for Huawei to come to the United States, and that there are a lot of stories about Huawei struggling to enter the United States. I think the most important of all is that we really need to understand that this is a community and this is a global community. What we care is really about the end users. We're coming here is not to compete particularly against someone, either Samsung or Huawei itself. We need to be able to recognize we have a lot to learn from Apple, from Samsung, when we're doing business here, no matter in the United States or either in Korea or in China. Important thing, as you mentioned, that what we need to understand is that what consumer what their needs are. For instance, like you mentioned, for the youth generation, the young generation nowadays, they're so much into social networking, they're so much into contents, and I think Huawei's approach is to come into to a market to see if we can add value to that particular markets. For instance, like even Huawei ourselves, we develop applications. Those applications are supposed to be really value added to a lot of outstanding and prominent applications nowadays out there in the market. For instance, everybody's using Facebook, Instagram. We're using different kinds of things. Some people using Google Plus, and some people using Google Search, Google Voice. All this stuff, and how we can add value to our users here is our eventual task. Whether or not we can absolutely improve, as I mentioned, that to be able to improve the productivity and people's everyday quality of life is our eventual goal. Of course, hardware itself is supposed to be very responsible for hardware itself. That's what the quality is coming from. But the software itself is also quality. It's related to people, how they can better utilize, how easily they can utilize, and also how to be responsible from content perspective, especially for the youth generation. That's, I think, all these criteria and goals are what Huawei needs to pay attention to in order to build up brand in a new market. And nowadays, in the global market, Huawei actually has almost #1 market share. No matter it's infrastructure or mobile handsets business, but in worldwide, we still have a long way to go. And in European, we have reached quite a few success. But in the United States, to us, it's a still emerging market. And what we want to do here is really to add value, not to compete. So that's how I want to portray ourselves as a provider, not necessarily as a service provider, but as a consumer value add provider for this market. And I really look forward to seeing you guys' feedback in terms of what we should do, what we need in order to improve our product, improve our services, and improve our quality so that we can really see technology is really combined with human life and human productivity on a daily basis. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, June. I'm going to take moderator's privilege and ask the last question to all 4 of our panelists. And from a young person's point of view as well, not mine, but from my students' point of view, and ask what kinds of skills are you looking in your future employees, in particular related to these issues that we've been talking about, digital aspects and how the industries are changing so fast. So what could our students bring to the table to be your future employees? And each of you probably have a slightly different take on that, but let's start with Albert.
Pressure's on. No, yes, as far as the youth and employees, we see, from a youth entrepreneurship, technical skills are clearly one of the basics. STEM education is a critical part of one, I think, being successful in business. But the other part we see a lot of is the soft skills in terms of networking, marketing, and getting involved in the community. And that's one thing we're definitely seeing a lot of from the corporations as well, the corporate social responsibility side, that the youth entrepreneurs have to be engaged in their community and also politically. When those 3 pillars are together, it makes you for a more successful business, and it gets you a leg up, especially if you want to be in the supply chain, some of these big corporations here. If you demonstrate that community responsibility angle, that's where I think youth would need to learn a little more to get into those soft skills. So, 1 minute or less. Okay.
Right. Again, as I mentioned that as a one of the professionals in the telecommunication industry. I think we're not just a technology provider, but we want to bridge ourselves to everybody and everyday human being's life. And when I first, 7 years ago, when I first visited Verizon, it was not really the first time, but that was the first time when I entered Verizon headquarters, Verizon Wireless headquarters lobby, and to see in their lobby they said customer first, accountability, responsibility, professionalism, and perseverance. And I was so struck by these principles and philosophy. And to me, I think as a telecom professional, we're not coming to a workplace just as a technical person. We need to be having our values. For instance, like for all these years, I still remember all these 5 words I saw in Verizon Wireless, the lobby. And really, every time when I work, when I come to the office, when I talk to the customer, when I talk to my partners, I always remind myself to be that way. And I think no matter in my previous company and in my current company, I have to say I have a wonderful team. And when I'm looking for young people to join a company like that, I want them to hold value, what they are, every day when they're working, they need to be responsible. They need to be consider who will be their consumers. And then, even though you are a professor and your consumers are your students, if you are engineers and your consumers are end users. So everything, every day, what we need to do is to think about responsibility, to be professional, and to hold perseverance, to hold accountability. And all these are very, very important value when we work on a day-to-day basis.
From a Delta perspective, I think it was just said best also because we are a company based on values. Within the e-commerce group, of course, technical skill set is always best, but we also, because it's so changing and so diverse and so many other touch points from the company, having somebody with kind of well-rounded backgrounds across marketing, communications, things like that. Every day we're dealing with different groups within the company as we are the one spot where everything comes together to our customers.
Well, Richard, the question is about young people and how they can, what they've got to think about. In this world, I give you an example. 6-7 years back, we established a plant in central Mexico. And we got people from the farms, young people, but they all basically came, almost all of them, with a mobile phone. 25-30 years back was unheard of, so they come with knowledge. And the amazing thing is that these folks, these people over there in Mexico, people in the farms learn to use our sophisticated CAD systems very, very fast. So today, the great advantage of the young people is they may not know it, but they come with a tremendous empowerment of already this knowledge of what to do. But then I think, when people ask me this, I say they got to have a passion. Because it doesn't matter what you do. If you are cutting grass, cut it with a passion as if you're the best grass cutter in the world. So if you are somebody working, that's what I say to people, that if you don't have a passion, you're not going to succeed. Then you've got to help your company and your supervisor become better. A lot of folks think that it's a company's job to make them better. It should be the other way around. When you do that, it changes the perspective. And I think that, and then you just can't think about it. When I got involved, I was a student in New York, and I started my first job printing envelopes. I thought it was a pretty good job. I thought I was going to print envelopes for the rest of my life. Until a year later, I moved. And then I learned bookkeeping. I'd never seen books in my life. But the question is, you've got to take a step at a time. You take a step at a time, it's like climbing stairs. You can't go to the 20th stair, you've got to go to the second one. You keep on climbing, the chances are you'll reach the top.
Great. Thank you so much for
Next is to eat.